Colorful text over images of past events. Logo, Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network. Professional Development Workshops. Accessibility in Virtual Events, a technical step-by-step. Black text on a white background. Accessibility in Virtual Events, a technical step-by-step. Below, logos for ICANN and Illinois Arts Council Agency. At top right, mini video of speaker and ASL interpreter.
Hello and welcome to Accessibility in Virtual Events, a technical step-by-step. This event is hosted by the Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network, ICANN for short, which is funded by the Illinois Arts Council Agency and supported by our parent organization, the Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium, or CCAC for short. CCAC is a nonprofit, and we would appreciate any support you can provide to keep workshops like this going by using the QR code on your screen or visiting chicagoculturalaccess.org/support. Thank you to the nearly 500 registrants all across Illinois today. We're very glad that so many of you are interested in keeping virtual events going and making them accessible. I'm Brittany Pyle, your host for the webinar. I am a mid-30s white woman with shoulder-length auburn hair. I'm wearing a green top and big over-the-ear black headphones, and I'm seated in front of a window with white curtains. I'm the project manager for ICANN, a steering committee member of CCAC, and the director of production and audience experience with the Chicago Humanities Festival. My pronouns are she, her. A few housekeeping notes. We have closed captions available by selecting the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and selecting Show Subtitle. We have 2 ASL interpreters that will be trading off and on. Look for the 2 people with ASL in their Zoom name. In order to see the chat and the Q&A features at the bottom of your screen, exit full screen mode. A hotkey for this is by pressing the Escape button on your keyboard. You'll want to use the Q&A feature to ask the panelists a question, and the chat box is to let us know of any tech concerns or ask any questions of the ICANN and CCAC teams. To set up your expectations for today, the webinar will flow like this. We will play a short video tutorial recorded by one of our panelists. Knowing that Zoom mediates an already mediated experience, if it would be supportive, we will share the transcripts of those videos in the chat box, and you can utilize the live closed captions, and we will be sharing a captioned and audio described version of the videos after the webinar. After each video, we'll have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A allotted for you to ask questions of the panelists who will answer your questions live. We'll go through 4 learning sections: setting up ASL, setting up captions, setting up audio description, and virtual event roles. Throughout the video, feel free to type your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. My teammate Andy will read the questions aloud to our panelists. And when it comes time for the Q&A parts of our tutorials, we just want to remind everyone that we're all learning and that some of us are beginners in our exposure to access and disability. So it's okay if you don't know the right words to say. We just ask that you pose the questions in the most respectful way you know how to. Lastly, we are recording this webinar, so it will be available after the fact, and specific segments, the specific video segments of the tutorials will live on the Chicago Cultural Accessibility Consortium's YouTube channel, which will be shared in the chat here. First, let's begin by learning about setting up ASL interpretation for virtual events and meetings. For those not already familiar, American Sign Language is its own language and can be a preference over captions for someone who is deaf to receive the clearest form of communication. To talk us through setup is Risa Jazz Rivkind, who is the Director of Civic Engagement and Marketing at Disability Lead, formerly known as ADA 25 Advancing Leadership. And she's a co-chair and board treasurer of CCAC. All right, let's queue up and play the video.
A Zoom gallery view with 4 participants. Speaker in top right corner. At right, a listing of participants.
Alright, so I'm going to go over how to set up an ASL interpreter in a Zoom meeting. So what you want to do is when you have your participants logged in, there's a number of ways to do this, but you can click participants in the bottom of your screen, which will show the participant listing. And then a lot of interpreters prefer to be able to pin multiple people which allows them to keep track of their partner interpreter, because many times if a meeting or a webinar is longer than 30 minutes, 60 minutes, there's normally more than one interpreter. So it allows people to track their partner. So if you hover over, let's see, Jennifer Lopez, when she's an interpreter, you can say, allow to multi-pin.
In the participant list, right-click on the name and select the option from the menu.
And now Jennifer Lopez will be able to pin her partner when she's interpreting. Now, let's say that someone, which consumer is using the interpreter, you can allow the consumer to multi-pin as well, so that the consumer is always able to view the interpreter no matter who is speaking. So you can do the allow to multi-pin for multiple people. So let's say Sarah wants to, is a consumer using the ASL interpreter, you would say allow to multi-pin. And then now she can go ahead and pin multiple people on her end. What this allows you to do, again, is to track who you need to track throughout the entire meeting. Now, let's say that you send people into breakout groups and then you come back to the main room. Keep in mind that multi-pinning doesn't stay. You have to reset it if you go into a breakout room and then come back in. So that privilege you can continue to change throughout the meeting. Another thing to keep in mind is the view. Now, if you go into speaker view,
she selects the view option icon at top right on the screen. Selecting speaker view brings one large video to center and shifts all other videos to a small gallery row at the top of the screen.
You won't be able to see the interpreter unless someone has pinned the interpreter in their video. So let's say I want to make sure that I can see the interpreter Jennifer Lopez at all times. So I'm going to go ahead and pin her.
In Jennifer's video, in the top right corner, she clicks on the three dots and selects Pin, bringing Jennifer's video to center.
Which will keep her large for me as a viewer or as the host of the meeting. I like to stay in gallery view. This is my personal preference, just so I can keep track of everyone on the logistics side. But the audience members are able to do the same thing as view and choose, what view works best for them. What we also do is the interpreters will do this on their own, but you can turn on and off your video by going down here to the start and stop video. This allows for when the interpreter who is not active to be off camera to lessen the amount of people on camera, so it's more clear of who to focus on, and in fact, in webinar view, it takes that person completely off. Now, an important thing to also advertise for attendees is you can click the little three buttons in anybody's video and say hide non-video participants. This will be on the user side, so now they only see people who are on screen. So when the interpreters go off screen to take a break, that video will no longer be in view, and you'll have the interpreter who is active in view.
In a participant video, she clicks on the three dots and selects Rename option.
And then one of the things that I do like to do for meetings is rename people so that you can easily find the ASL interpreter if you're an audience member and looking. So you can make, this is something I do. I do ASL in front of the interpreter's name, and then that way it's a uniform format so that if people are coming in and out of the meeting, they can easily find who they need to pin as an audience member and keep track of.
In the participants listing, she clicks on a participant and a menu appears with an option to spotlight.
When I originally recorded the video, I left out a piece about spotlighting, which you'll see is in the window that pops up on the screen now. Spotlighting is a good tool to use if you have a lot of speakers and the audience is not able to see everyone on their one screen. So for example, if you are using a tablet and for a Zoom webinar or a different kind of device than a desktop, you might not see more than 4 speakers at a time in Zoom webinar. So spotlighting would make sure that the interpreter is there for the whole time. This affects the view for everyone. So I would say just make sure that spotlighting is something that is needed before doing it. In case you have a setting where you have turned off the chat function for a certain reason, if you want to what you should do is make sure that interpreters can chat each other at any time. So if your chat settings are only for host, you can go ahead and make the interpreter. So I'm going to go back to Jennifer Lopez and make her a co-host, and then make the other interpreter a co-host as well, so they can chat each other in case they need to go over logistics while the meeting is happening. So not everyone will see that chat happening.
Words appear. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks so much for watching, and it really is important to understand the needs of your consumers so you can pick the best option to make your event fully accessible.
During Q&As, at left an ASL interpreter signs, at right the moderator, at bottom the presenter.
All right, I will call Risa to the stage, and I will spotlight her to bring her into view. Risa, I'll have you get started by describing yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Risa. I'm in a very neutral white and gray room, including my chair. I have shoulder length, longer-ish brown straight hair, purple glasses. I'm a brown woman, and my shirt today is white and blue.
Great. This is
and my
very
pronouns are she, her. Sorry, Brittany, I cut you off.
Thank you for stepping on your pronouns. Yes, so this is a meta conversation showing your video with showing our ASL interpreters on the right-hand side. One thing that I wanted to address before we launch into questions for you is that because right now we are in a webinar view, and we found with so many panelists, the best way is to hide non-video participants and spotlight who needs to stay on the screen permanently. So that's me and our two interpreters, and they're trading off and on by turning their video on when they're ready to interpret. And then I'm calling people to stage by spotlighting you when it's your turn. So just making that transparent for the attendees that are here. I'm going to cue my teammate Andy, who's off screen, but he has questions coming in the chat or the Q&A feature for Risa.
Yeah, so someone asked if you have advice for creating press language that would signal to the community that a program is inclusive.
Sure, this is Risa. I think there's a number of ways of doing this. One, from when we create language to advertise the event, what registration questions we're asking. So when we create a registration event, when we publicize an event, are we saying right from the get-go, we will have captions, we will have ASL interpreters, we will have audio description, whatever it might be from the get-go, that's a pretty clear signal that the event is inclusive, and followed by having the option to request accommodation in the registration system or via email and phone number to a direct person. So if there's follow-up questions or concerns, a participant can connect directly to the host of the event. And then again, reinforcing what is available and how to access those services in any know before you Zoom kind of emails or know before you go email, that just make it clear from start to finish the intentionality of the services available.
Budget questions are always a big one. So someone was asking, is there a ballpark area amount that they should budget for, particularly ASL?
This is Risa. Also, good question. I want to also make clear that I'm speaking from my experience at Disability Lead and CCAC of hosting events and running events. Every event is different. So also every service provider is different. So I'm going to throw out some numbers, but please use this as, an earmark. And I recommend you find a vendor and work with them directly to get their rates to finalize whatever your budget might look like. But we do budget accommodation costs from the very beginning as part of our whole budget season, if you will, and approval. So every event has a very large budget associated with it for accommodation. we budget anywhere from $65 to $85 per interpreter, knowing that most events will have 2 interpreters per hour per event. So again, $65 to $85 per interpreter per hour per event. And the range, again, could be related to whether it's in-person, virtual, whether it's recorded and publicly shared, and also if there's like a subject matter expertise required. So that's just a number, again, so for you to use as an earmark to start approximating, but encourage you to connect with a service provider that you will be using to really plan appropriately.
Are these functions, the spotlighting, the pinning, is this all available in Zoom meetings as well as webinars?
This is Risa. Yes, they are functions that the host of the event can access and see, or the co-host, depending upon settings, in Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar. That video was extremely quick, and I know we'll be sharing it after for you to reference. And I go between showing you meeting and webinar options, and 5-minute videos to talk through a lot is kind of confusing, and so welcome you to reach out. I know my contact is shared in the chat. This is what we've learned to be true for our participants. Again, every event might look different, but they are controls that you should be able to access if you are the host of the meeting or webinar.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say it's always good to have a test run. As we learned yesterday, we did a test run of making a webinar and making sure that there were enough people on the call to be panelists, ASL interpreters, stand-ins, and attendees, so you could see what it's like from the attendee perspective. So recommend testing across the board.
Can't highlight that and second that enough. It's really give yourself time to learn it and figure it out before it goes live. It's always a little nerve-wracking. We have almost 500 people registered, so we wanted to make sure it was seamless. And it takes a lot of behind-the-scenes work and prep to get this right.
Yep. Any more questions, Andy?
Oh, millions. Do you know what a recommended a length of time one ASL interpreter might need before needing a break by another ASL interpreter?
This is Risa. I am not an expert on those kind of logistics of ASL interpreters standards. I know that when we have an event longer than 30 minutes, we almost always have 2 interpreters, and they switch off every 15 minutes or so. And so, I think that generally could be kind of applied if you're trying to make a quick budget. But again, recommend that you connect with a service provider to verify that approximate length of time.
So here's a question about having spotlighted folks not actually showing up in the recording they make of the Zoom. Do you have any suggestions to make sure that the ASL interpreters are part of the recording, whether that's pinning or spotlighting?
This is Lisa. I think Brittany and I are both laughing and nodding along because this is a struggle that I think we can relate to well. I have found the best solution for our purposes at Disability Lead is to record the gallery view and to use the gallery view as the main video to make main publicized recording of the video to ensure that the interpreter is always visible. This may or may not work for you depending upon if there was shared slides and media, but the gallery view seems to be the trick for us for making sure that the people who need to be shown are shown throughout the whole video.
More questions coming in for Risa?
Is there a way for people who don't wish to see the interpreter window to hide the interpreter when they're spotlighted?
That is no. Yeah. We make the call on our events that, if you have hearing privilege, you can look away. But for people who need to see the interpreter, we want it to make sure that that is the main video tile that you can see. So that's how we've chosen to spotlight. If you're just in a Zoom meeting, as Risa's video covered, you can allow for pinning. So the audience member can choose to pin the interpreter, and as long as that is described up front, like in the registration materials and at the top of the meeting or the event, that's fine. And so it's sort of a choose your own path as the audience member. But for us in webinar, especially knowing how webinar will sort of push people to small video tiles, we wanted to spotlight to make sure that the interpreters are nice and large and they never disappear.
Yeah, and this is Lisa. I'm just going to add one quick thing that might work too for a webinar. If you're showing a video or slide and you want to make the interpreter smaller but was shared bigger, there should be a line on your screen that you can hold and drag to do that. But otherwise, what Brittany is saying is it's a permanent picture, and it's just prioritizing access the best way that we can to choose the spotlight when needed.
Yeah, I was meaning to say that to someone. I think someone in the chat was saying the video looked a little fuzzy because of how small it was by default. But yes, there is a line where you can sort of drag to make the video larger for yourself and the speaker tile small.
This is a combo of two questions. Do you have any tips for finding ASL interpreters, and in particular for finding POC interpreters?
This is Lisa, great question. The way that we, for Disability Lead, have really been able to create strong relationships with interpreters is by having our deaf and hard of hearing members tell us their preferred vendors. So, we let the users tell us what their preference is, and then we do our best to connect with those providers for meeting their needs. And sometimes those requests include identity, whether race, gender, etc. And then sometimes it's just, the syntax of the way the interpreting falls, whether it follows English spoken language or not. So my recommendation would be, if you know who's using your services, ask if they have a preference. They may not, and that's okay. Not everyone does, but start there and then build a relationship with those service providers. In terms of having specific BIPOC representation, I think this is something that we're all working towards having, but again, if there's a preference by the user to have whatever identity that they share, it's really important that we convey that to the service provider so they can meet that. I would also word of mouth ask around. There's a lot of fabulous providers out there, and especially in the virtual setting, we can connect with providers anywhere. So it's not limiting when we're virtual.
Yeah, I would add to that, at the Chicago Humanities Festival, sometimes we want to have ASL interpretation before anyone we know has requested it, because it's just important to us to provide that access. And if the speakers of the event or the content of the event are so closely tied to identity, when we work with our service provider to book the ASL interpreters, we would make that request of asking for someone with that identity to mirror, because they are sort of providing the filter of translation of the content. So we want to make sure the cultural competency is there and the representation is there. I believe we have 2 minutes left, so maybe just time for one more quick one, Andy, for Risa.
How does a presentation or PowerPoint or screen share alter or affect the pinned interpreters or the speakers?
Great question. I'm just trying to visualize when that happened. I think Brittany was talking about that in the beginning. So this webinar that you are in right now is a heavy mixture of shared content, speakers, and then all of our service providers with us. And so that's why Brittany mentioned we are spotlighting and pinning the appropriate speakers and interpreters so that they are consistently viewable with the shared content. The shared content does alter how many people is visible on the screen at once. So I'm going to answer and not answer your question. It really depends how many people you're trying to show. So if it's only the shared content and the interpreter may be visible the whole time. If you add in speakers and audio and other components over that, might not hold true, and so you will need to spotlight or pin at that point. And that's where the test runs that Brittany mentioned really come into play. And knowing that audience members, participants may also be joining in different forms also play into that. So on a desktop, laptop, you'll see more than you would if you were on a phone or a tablet or other type of device, which means you would see less speakers at once. So it really depends upon how many things and how many people you're trying to show.
Great. Thank you so much, Risa. I will have you turn your video off and mute yourself while we queue up the next video, and I will remove her spotlight. All right, Kinneret, we're ready for the next video.
A voiceover. Screen recordings of Zoom and YouTube settings.
Hello, my name is Eddie Medrano, Assistant Director of Production at Chicago Humanities Festival. I'm here to walk you through caption setup for Zoom meetings, webinars, and YouTube Live. Let's go ahead and begin with Zoom. First thing we want to do is access our personal room settings and turn on closed captions. This can be done by logging into your account at zoom.us. While in the settings view, select In Meeting, Advanced Settings on the left panel and scroll over to Closed Captions to enable the feature. You'll see the icon slide over and turn blue. Turning on CC will also allow participants to view the captions displayed as a separate transcript rather than a text overlay. You can also enable the use of a Caption API token, which allows your service provider the ability to stream text to Zoom via third-party service/captioning software. By turning on closed captioning, you'll automatically enable saved captions. This allows participants to save the captions or transcripts after the meeting. Now that captions are enabled, start a new meeting or webinar. The live transcript/closed caption feature will now be visible to just the host. As host, click this button to begin using open captions.
Bottom center icon titled Live Transcript.
From here, you'll have the ability to type captions yourself or select another participant to transcribe. To assign someone else, click Assign a Participant to Type and hover over the person's name in the pop-up participant window. Click on More and assign this guest to type closed captions. After you've assigned your guest to caption, they can bring up the entry field by selecting the CC button in the lower menu. From here, they'll have the option to manually input or ingest the API token into their captioning software, such as StreamText. As the captioner, hit Enter or Return in the entry field to submit your text. This will provide the option to save the transcription as a text document. A third option is the use of AI-generated captions. This is a great feature to use if you don't have access to a live captioner. As a participant, you'll be able to access closed captions by selecting Show Subtitle in your menu bar.
Clicks Live Transcript icon to access menu options.
This icon will also allow guests to view the full transcript or change the size of their captions in the settings window. While in this accessibility window, users will also see a wide array of screen reader alert options.
Left side menu, last option titled Accessibility.
Next, we'll discuss how to set up captions for YouTube streams. This is for event producers that might be streaming directly to YouTube or using some type of RTMP software, such as OBS or Wirecast. Depending on your backend setup, you may not want captions embedded into your live feed. If this is the case, you'll want to bypass the previous method and caption directly to YouTube. Now let's go ahead and create an event on our YouTube page.
He logs into YouTube. In top right corner, he selects the Create icon, then selects Go Live.
Once in the Control Studio, you'll want to scroll over to Additional Settings and enable Closed Captions. Like Zoom, you'll know captions are on when the icon turns blue. Once toggled, be sure to select Post Captions to URL and copy the ingestion link. For the sake of accuracy, I recommend clicking the copy button and temporarily saving to your clipboard. Provide this URL to your captioner or access provider to enter into their YouTube-supported caption software. If set up properly, captions should send directly from the captioner software to the YouTube player. It's important to note that your captioner should be receiving a real-time audio feed and not audio from the live stream itself. Because of the natural delay in your stream signal, we want our captioner to be transcribing as it happens rather than how it's heard in YouTube. One more thing to note for our event producers. Because you're unable to see captions on YouTube until the program has gone live, one way to test the setup is to take the backend captioner link, stream text in this case, and send some test captions. Here's an example from a recent CHF program.
Streamtext.net screen showing notice You are connected to event, and sample text, the program will begin shortly.
Once the program is live, you can view captions on the stream by hovering over the video and selecting the CC button located on the lower menu. The red line underneath is your indicator that captions are on. To edit the appearance of the captions themselves, click on the gear icon and select Subtitles/CC and click on Options. You'll see a number of customization options that will allow you to tweak the captions to best suit your needs. Now, sit back and enjoy the show.
All right, thank you. I realized before I bring Eddie to the stage that I neglected to intro his video or his bio, so I'll do that now. We were learning about captions, and for those who are not familiar with captions and have worked with captioners before, captions describe dialogue and other relevant sounds that convey meaning for hard of hearing people, deaf people who might not prefer ASL, English learners, and more. And talking us through that setup in that video was Eddie Medrano. He is the Assistant Director of Production at the Chicago Humanities Festival, and he moonlights as an AV Tech and Production Manager for Fitzgerald's Nightclub. So I will bring Eddie to the stage. Eddie, if you want to turn your video on.
Hi, thank you for that intro, Brittany. My name is Eddie Medrano. I am a Hispanic male in his early 30s. I have short, dark brown hair and a full beard, approximately 1 inch long. I'm also wearing a black button-down shirt. And behind me is a bicycle framed bar that sits atop a grayish carpet in front of a tan colored wall. There are a couple of show posters and dog beds present behind me, and my pronouns are he, him.
Great. Before Andy gets a question queued up for Eddie, I just wanted to say I realized that when we're sharing the screen, the video might be a little small to see all of the finer points of the video, but rest assured when we share this, you'll be able to access the video in full screen, and hopefully this will be a useful tool for you after the fact as well. All right, Andy, do you have a question ready for Eddie?
For sure. Could you discuss how you would recommend setting up cart captioning for events that are simultaneously in person and live streamed?
Sure. There are a couple of answers depending on what your setup. The approach is pretty similar though. If you are using, I can speak just from my experience, and traditionally we have used StreamText as our captioning software. So I would recommend setting up your live stream first. Typically, you can go ahead and simulcast at the same time. You can send captions depending on whether you want them to be closed captioned or open captioned. But for now, we're just going to worry about kind of step by step. I would recommend setting up captions through either method in those videos first, so you can hit your video. And then from there, I would recommend using something like a text on top, which is a pretty inexpensive solution, wireless solution that allows text to be shared from one device to another, specifically from the captioner's device to an external device. From there, you can overlay this text directly onto the media that you are presenting, or in the instance that there is no media, you can connect the receiving device directly to an external screen, such as a big screen TV via HDMI cable or another input. If your captioner is remote, the setup is a little bit different. You want to similarly set up a remote stream before you worry about having anything hit your in-person content. From there, you simply take that third-party captioning software such as Streamcast or Text on Top and overlay that onto the appropriate screen.
Full disclosure, Eddie and I work together at Chicago Humanities Festival, and we haven't yet done a simulcast of in-person event with captions and that hitting YouTube with captions, but that is coming for us this fall. And I trust that Eddie has the tech know-how, as he just described, in order to get both happening simultaneously. We've done them both separately, but I'm curious to see how that will work. Andy, another question for Eddie.
Have you noticed a quality difference between internal Zoom live captioning or any other third-party software that would do auto captioning? Is there one that you would recommend above any other?
We've tried a couple of different softwares at CHF, and we found that really none of them are perfect. If I had to recommend one, the most accurate might be Otter AI. They've really done a great job of enhancing their technology, their algorithm to get up to about 95% accuracy. That said, there are some limitations with the software. It's free up to 600 minutes per month. So after that, you have to start paying. And again, there's still that 5% variance of inaccuracy that you have to worry about. It does a good job of transcribing and picking up people's voices, which is something that Zoom does not do. However, it is never going to give you the same personalization as having a real live captioner.
Yeah, I have a follow-up too. Is there any platform preference for accessibility and just use audience experience between YouTube Live, Facebook Live, or Zoom?
To view captions?
Or yeah, to view captions or have a good accessible audience experience. What is your professional opinion as a production person?
Sure. Well, I mean, in this virtual landscape, I would have to say that we're still figuring out how to best make any content as humanly accessible as possible. There isn't one particular method that I would recommend. If you have a full transcript available, I would suggest making that available to your audience. For instance, whenever we send our captions to YouTube, we find that the layout is not always the friendliest for our audience members to follow along with. Sometimes the lines are broken up, sometimes the speech is broken up in a way that makes the program inaccessible. So what we do is we share the full transcript via stream text, which follows along in real time as the captioner is typing it out. It's a lot more accurate, and it gives you a much better view of what is happening in the conversation as it happens. Same can be said for Facebook Live and Zoom. There are options to customize the appearance of the text, but ultimately the way that it hits that platform is kind of out of your control, whereas stream text is the most direct line to the card captioner.
One thing I'll add in our experience is that to have the most legible captions, we've found that having pre-recorded videos with captions is the way versus live. If you have a choice between making your event a live stream or a pre-recorded video, we would probably recommend pre-recorded video every time, because you could send that pre-recorded video off to one of your service providers, whether you're working with Caption Access, ACS, Rev, all of those places and many more will caption a video for you, and the captions will appear right synced perfectly when people are speaking, and it'll be 2 to 3 lines of captions at once. So it's a very legible experience compared to live, where live stream, there's always going to be a slight delay. It's just, a human captioner that's listening and typing, and that has a bit of a latency naturally built in.
Are there any AI captioning services that you would recommend for languages other than English, in particular ones that would switch between? And then how would you deal with the same issue of multiple languages in a pre-recorded video as well?
Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that. I don't have history using a different language with subtitles. However, I would point to the answer that Brittany just gave and send that off to a post-captioning provider so that they can accurately convey what is being said on screen, as well as provide that backup transcript or file. They can provide an SRT or subtitle file, which can be uploaded directly alongside the program via YouTube or whatever platform you're using.
And that would lead great into the budget question. Do you have any ballpark estimates for what kind of costs getting personalized captions would ensue, or even any other technical add-ons that you've mentioned?
Sure. It depends on what approach you're taking. If you're going the post-production kind of pre-captioned route, depending on your turnover time, captions can start at $1.25 per minute and increase as high to over $4 a minute, depending on how soon you want that returned. We use Rev captioning service for most of our videos. They charge $1.25 per minute and can have the video back in your hands within about 24 hours for 30 minutes of content. So the longer the video, the more expensive it's going to be, the more time you're asking to be captioned, the longer you're going to have to wait for it, sort of thing. For pre-recorded programs, we generally budget about $75 to $100 per program. And then for in-person events, that rate can range from $100 to about $150 per captioner. And they are typically scheduled with a 2-hour minimum. And then anything beyond that is billed at about a quarterly rate. So every 15 minutes, you will be charged an additional fee. The last method is looking at just doing captions yourself. But even then, understand that that does take time. That takes a lot of manpower. There was somebody earlier in the chat box, I think Christine Scott, who mentioned that their team generally takes the captions and handles them in-house. That's wonderful if you have a team to support it. However, know that even then you are paying somebody to sit there and do the manual work. So it's important to carve out a budget. If we're looking for a ballpark estimate, I mean, I'd say it's good to budget at least $100 per event.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of videos in our archive at Chicago Humanities Festival that weren't captioned because of how old they are, but we use a software that's relatively affordable. I think it's about $20 a month, called Veed, V-E-E-D, that does auto-generate a transcript that you can then edit. But as Eddie mentioned, it does take so long for someone who's not a professional captioner to listen and go back and tweak the spellings and the grammar and all of that. So we do recommend budget for it if you can. I think we have time for about one more question for Eddie. Andy, do you have another really juicy one? He's deliberating.
Sorry. Do you find that there's a benefit for using different text colors when using closed captions, perhaps for different speakers?
I think that's user preference. We like to add, specifically when we're on site, I mean, that's where we're most familiar with caption customization. We do like to add some kind of contrast between the text itself and the background bar that it is presented on. So that kind of that lower third, you want to make sure that any background images or media that is being shown behind the text is visible, clearly visible. But ultimately, I would say that that answer will change from user to user.
Yeah.
I guess to add to that, if you do have a live captioner, we find that adding chevrons and names is helpful to help differentiate who's actually speaking. And within that, you know, as I said, you do have the option to kind of customize different speakers and attach different colors to them, but that can also be as much of a distraction as it is helpful.
Yeah, a follow-up. Go ahead, Andy. I think you're going to
If you
ask
have time for one last question, I think this one is really good. For recommending for legibility when you're recording programs, would you recommend recording a live program that has live captioning already enabled or without it so that you can have it captioned for future use?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on whether you're recording the screen or recording just the video itself. If you really are okay with captions and you'd prefer to go the open caption route, I would recommend burning them onto the screen so that you don't have the option to remove. However, if you don't want that option, then sending it off for post captions is a great way to give your audience the option of enabling that separate track if they choose to do so.
Yeah, think if it's in a YouTube format, if you upload an SRT file, you can have the audience choose to click it on and off with that CC button. And as I mentioned, it does seem like more of a preference to have something completely synced with the video after the fact, but it comes down to what you have budget for. And, you know, if you already paid for a live captioner, by all means, like keep that work saved on the video. So yeah, I would agree with
a note for Zoom captions, if you do have captions, a live captioner, that file does save separately than the video itself. So you do have the option of re-uploading it as an SRT file if you decide to do so.
Yep. All right, that was very informative. Thank you, Eddie. I'll have you turn your video off and we'll move on to the next panelist, which I'll not forget to introduce this time. So one moment. Okay, next we will learn about setting up audio description. That will be in Zoom and YouTube. For those not already familiar, audio description describes the important visual components of a production, a piece of content, PowerPoint presentation, etc. for people who are blind or have low vision. To talk us through this setup is Bridget Melton, who is a professional audio describer. She has described a lot of prestigious events, including the 2021 presidential inauguration. So without further ado, we will play Bridget's video.
My name is Bridget Melton, and I'm an audio describer here in the United States. Pre-pandemic, my focus was on descriptions for live performances and events, and of course, everything is different now. As we shift to virtual mediums, here are 3 ways to provide audio descriptions for your virtual events and how to support your access provider so that you get the best possible service for your audience. First up is simply tasking any presenters with providing their own audio descriptions as they speak. When they are introduced, have them give a short sentence or 2 description of themselves and their environment if it supports the program. If any visuals are used, make sure they describe them. This can mean obvious visuals such as pictures, videos, or infographics, but also physicality, such as hand gestures, verbalizing audience engagement, or technical issues. If your audience reacts to a visual, take a moment to describe it. And lastly, if a speaker has not been involved for a length of time, make sure that a quick name is said to reintroduce the voice. Moving on, if your event has been pre-recorded or even parts of it pre-recorded, then pre-record your audio description. This will allow for higher quality descriptions as they have been scripted and the audio levels matched, and it also lessens the chance of tech snafus. While there are many different kinds of video and recording software out there, personally, I use Apple's Final Cut Pro. On the screen now, I have opened Final Cut Pro, showing my edits for a recent project. There are 3 basic steps to producing the descriptions. I first start with the original media on my timeline. Then I move through the video and leave markers where I think potential description might go. Next, I script out my descriptions by using captions, placed at suitable pauses in the audio. I then write the description and rehearse to make sure it fits in the pause allotted. As the final layer, I move through the captions, recording each one, adjusting the script and audio levels as I go. While this is the most time-intensive and costly way to deliver descriptions, again, it will result in a more polished and seamless experience for your audience. And lastly, to provide live descriptions, where the describer is delivering them in real time, there are 2 general paths you can take. The most used platform for both is Zoom, which I have open now on the screen at the login page. You can have open descriptions where everyone can hear it, and the describer is usually set up as a panelist. You can also do closed descriptions, either by having end users call in to a separate Zoom call to hear the descriptions, which necessitates needing 2 devices, or by using the language interpretation feature in your meeting. Here is a quick outline of how to set that up. First, in order to use the language interpretation feature, the host of the meeting must have a Zoom license, but the audio describer and participants do not. Then, before creating the meeting, the host should make sure that they have turned on the language interpretation feature in their account. On screen now, I have opened the Settings menu of Zoom, which you can reach by clicking on Settings in the main menu on the far left side of the page. Next, in the first column of options under the Meeting heading, click on the In Meeting Advanced option. Then scroll down until you see the language interpretation setting and make sure it is toggled on. It should appear in a light blue color if it is. Once you turn it on, it will remain on until you turn it off. Later, when creating a meeting, enter in all of your criteria as usual, but make sure that at the bottom of the meeting setup page, shown here, you check the box for Enable Language Interpretation. During the meeting or event, any participants that wish to hear the closed audio descriptions can then click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the meeting screen and opt in, shown here as the option second from the right, a circle with latitude and longitude lines over it. Overall, the translator function works well because it allows anyone to listen without needing to declare themselves. It has closed descriptions to prevent possible overstimulation of other participants, and no extra logins or steps are needed for the participants. Some downsides to the translator function are that you have to declare a language being translated, such as French, as there is no write-in option or selection for audio description, which might be confusing to some participants. You are also limited to 1 describer, as 2 describers, even if on the same language, cannot hear each other and so cannot work in tandem. And lastly, the original audio will be ducked or lowered anytime the describer speaks, which might cause pertinent information to be missed, especially if the original audio is fast-paced. Back now in my living room, let's close up by discussing how you can support your service providers. When booking, always give as much lead time as possible and have an idea of the kind of descriptions you're wanting. For example, extemporaneous or scripted, and how they will be delivered, such as Zoom or pre-recorded. Other useful items in no particular order are a run of show, preferred names, pronouns, and pronunciations for anyone that will be described, who the intended audience is, such as public or private meetings, all pre-recorded material, even if providing the service live, as studying the materials provides a better service. Especially if the event is heavy on visuals, as much as possible, make sure the original materials provide breadth for inline descriptions. A script, if there is one, whether it is a performance or an event, as those usually have stage directions and notes in them to provide insight into the important visuals. Tech rehearsals, if anything is being delivered live. And lastly, advertise the access you are offering, including the names of the service providers. Some audiences seek out specific describers to follow, and some audiences may decide to attend solely based on the access provided. So shout it from the rooftops and list your access and providers anywhere you advertise the event. Show from the beginning that all are welcome. That does it for the basics of providing audio description for your virtual events and how to support your service provider. If you have any questions or follow-up, you can find me online at bridgetmelton.com.
All right, I will call Bridget to the stage to begin answering some questions about her video. One moment. Hi, Bridget. I'll have you describe yourself today.
Hi, my name is Bridget Melton, and my pronouns are she, her. I am seated in front of a light gray and white geometric curtain. My skin is a pale peach tone. My hair is brown and gray and styled up in a bun. I wear eyeglasses with black frames, and my shirt is a black blouse.
Great. As Andy is looking at the questions for you, I was remarking on the fact that you mentioned the prep materials needed for service providers in general. And I would want to just echo that audio describers, ASL interpreters, and captions all appreciate as much information as you can provide in advance, including any scripted remarks, including any video clips that you'll show, or visual components are absolutely necessary for audio description. What are some of the most useful things for you to receive in advance, Bridget, including your desired timelines, if you had like your absolute preference?
It really just depends on how am I delivering the audio description. I'm finding a lot of times, even if I'm doing live extemporaneous, so much of it is probably still pre-recorded, like the Democratic National Convention. That was one in 2020 that there was a lot of pre-recorded items, but we weren't given them in advance. And so just the more that you can give people, for those, we did have a really neat, I was given a run of show down to not only the names of who was going to be in the segment I was about to describe, but even that the segment was going to last 30 seconds. And so that really allowed me and my colleague to say, oh, we might get a name in and then just stop talking. But if it's going to be a 3-minute segment, now I know that I can kind of ease into it and listen to the cadence of the speaker and really feel out for where their pauses might be so that I can get my descriptions in there. Because the whole point of audio description is that you're not talking over the actual program. Mm-hmm. So as much materials in advance is just always wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Andy, do you have some questions queued up for Bridget?
Yes. Since audio describers don't have the same certifications that, say, an ASL interpreter would, what qualifications or recommendations should we look for when booking an audio describer?
I would definitely say that probably 95% of my clients come from word of mouth, that somebody else has asked an organization, like CCAC, and said, hey, what are some of the audio describers you work with? And that's where the bulk of my stuff comes from. But I do make sure that up on my website, I have examples of myself describing. I make available who clients were so that potential people can just reach out and say, did you like working with this service provider? So definitely I would just ask them for examples of things and ask for references.
Say you have the audio describer on site at your event. What kind of permanent hardware or tech would be needed? Is this possible to do in a small theater that maybe doesn't have as many of those resources?
Yes. So here I would like to plug CCAC's. They have an equipment loan program that will start back up after the pandemic. And so really you can have either a permanent sound system. A lot of this is going over your assisted listening device. It's the exact same equipment. So it's really great. You can knock out 2 accessible services in one. You just switch it to a different channel so that the audio describer is talking on one, and then you have your show feed on a different channel. And so I know that like Chicago Humanities Festival and Steppenwolf, they both use the Williams sound kit. There's a lot of different sound kits out there. If I would definitely go in with somebody, if you're a smaller organization on a small budget, look to kind of form a consortium of different organizations, or maybe if you guys all use the same venue, really approach the venue and say, try to get a grant because they will run a few $1,000s. but they're definitely great to have on site. You can have it mobile, like with the Williams Sound Kit that CCAC can loan out, or you can just have it built in, since a lot of companies are using it for their assisted listening devices. Did I answer the whole question for you, Andy?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. In
So
the
as you
chat,
were,
sorry, Andy, I just noticed in the chat, we have shared the link to the equipment loan program, so you can see all of the pieces that come with it and how to register for it.
Perfect. And one thing with the mobile kit, if I'm seated, if an audio describer is going to be in the house, in the audience, a lot of times kits will have them, but I personally travel with my own stenographer's mask. It's something that'll fit over my mouth, really will muffle the sound so that it's going, it's directionally going to who I want it to go to. And that'll really help with any sound bleed for audience members around me. But that's another great reason for why you tell your audiences what services you have going on. Because I mean, my steno mask can look very weird and scary, and I'm seated in the back row of the theater, and I've got a Bane mask on my face. And sometimes patrons do turn around to be like, what is this muffled sound that I'm hearing? And so if the audience knows, hey, this is an audio described performance, or hey, there's going to be ASL interpreters here, having that knowledge from the get-go, maybe somebody doesn't want to go to that performance, and that's cool. They can go to a different date. But if they are there, now they can know, oh, that's what that person is behind me. That's really neat. And it also allows them to say, oh, I have a family member or a friend. I didn't know this was being offered. Now I can come to the audience, like now they can come with me. It also allows, when people know in advance there's going to be audio description, it also allows users to say, hey, come to the theater with me. You don't have to describe it for me. You can just sit and be a patron this time. I know that there's going to be an audio describer that'll take care of it for me. Because a lot of times patrons who are blind or low vision, they've always, kind of had a family member or a friend who came and described it for them. And so it's exciting now with the huge influx of audio description available, that they can be independent and not have to rely on a family member or a friend that's going to describe it.
Yep. I will say at Chicago Humanities Festival, if we're in a small space and audio description is there, we like to just repeat it in the intro, because all of our events have someone that come out and give a welcome, and we'll just say, like, just so you know, there is an audio describer in the house, and it gives people the great feelings about, yes, you're offering access, but also just knowing you might hear some murmuring in the back. All right, Andy, more questions.
Yes. So listening to your video, your recorded video, with the issues you were talking about with the language channel, with having to specify it as like another language like French or something like that, and not being able to have two describers, is that something that you would recommend over doing a separate Zoom for audio description? Which do you think is preferable or works better in your experience?
If you need to have two or more audio describers, I would do it as a separate link. Where my issue is with a separate link is that now not only do I, the service provider, have to be managing two devices, two different Zoom calls, so is your user. They're having to manage two different devices, because you cannot have Zoom open on your laptop for two different things. And then it also means that I'm having to wear two separate headphones. So is your user, and I find that just really annoying, to have to do multiple headsets. But if you are going to be using more than one audio describer, it's very important that they can hear each other, so that they don't over-describe something that somebody else has already done, and that they're using consistent language. So in those instances, either having the audio describers be open audio description where everybody's just hearing it, that is one choice. Or the other choice would be then to be doing two different sessions. But if you're just doing one describer, I really prefer the language interpretation option, because that does allow you to just have one meeting, one headset, and everybody then, they don't have to say if they want the service or not. It's just there.
Another question, are there audio describers with distinct specialties, like some that are better with describing film or live theater, and how would you find those people?
That's going to be mostly word of mouth again. I different theaters. So like with live theater, Martin Wild is another describer in Chicago. And so he and I do a lot of live things. So we are people that get sought out to do live extemporaneous things, because just of the nature of it, we're used to thinking on our feet a little bit more with the descriptions. Out in LA and with different, we are freelance describers, but there are organizations like I think it's 3 Arts Media, Mind's Eye, Audio, Vocalize, things like that, where they're more of an organization that is already out on their website telling you what their specialties are. But for the most part, it's just going to be word of mouth.
So for folks who are looking to make audio description more integrated into their program rather than a sort of separate offering that could be turned on and off, do you have any tips for just how to bring audio description into your general program?
It really depends on the kind of event that you're doing. So I am seeing more and more dance is really trying to push the boundaries of open description. And if you've included access from the beginning, I think it's easy to do, and you can have some really, really fun play with how are you providing, how are you verbalizing the visuals. I would suggest, I can put a link to it in the chat. I would suggest Judith Jones is an audio describer in New Zealand. And she has done she's got a really neat write-up about working with the Wellington Integrated Dance in New Zealand. So I see it more with dance, kind of integrating it into their performances. I had mentioned in the video, if you're doing just a panel, I really love CCAC on their YouTube channel. So many of the videos are automatically, the event is already going to be audio described because we've provided our descriptions at the beginning before we speak. A lot of times people will remember to say, hey, this is Bridget speaking, things like that. When you do a presentation with slides, make sure you're describing all of the slides and take out a lot of your visual fluff from your slides too. You don't need to have, a funny GIF that plays or a cartoon on every page. They're rather distracting, and they're not just distracting for somebody having to vocalize them. They can just be distracting for lots of different segments of your audience. So open description is not, unless it's been fully integrated into the art or into the presentation, I typically don't like open audio description because I do find that it can be overstimulating for other audience members, especially because since audio description fits in the pauses, there might be a vocal delay either before or after a visual that has happened. And that can be rather jarring for somebody who is watching something and also listening to the audio description.
Yep. I think we have time for 2 more questions, Andy.
Cool.
Great. Are there any guidelines or standards for when and how to use extended descriptions?
Extended descriptions are usually more in an educational setting. So extended descriptions are where the video stops, the describer speaks, and then the video picks back up again. I find that it works well in an educational setting, but you do have to be conscious of the fact, like when I'm doing schoolwork for different universities, I have to be very conscious of the fact, am I now causing this person who's blind or low vision, this student to watch an hour-long video and all of their peers are just doing 15-minute video because of all of the extended description? So you really do need to keep that in mind. Why is the extended description necessary? Who is your audience for it? Because for the most part, if you need extended audio description, we see this a lot with live theater and live performances. You have a pre-show notes. So like for Hamilton, patron arrives 15 minutes early and there's going to be descriptions of these are the costumes, the characters, here's their settings. If you're going to be using shorthand, I described a magic show one time. And so I would go through, here's some really basic things that the magician is going to constantly do so that I don't have to explain to you what what they're doing with the cards. I can just use a shorthand. So the pre-show notes are very important for things like that. And I've even seen with Vocalize in the UK, where you can even start doing them on film, where while the credits are playing, assuming they are boring non-visual credits, you can say, hey, as the credits are continuing, here is an audio introduction. And that way you can help set up a film so that, again, all the users of the film are getting the exact same experience, whether or not they're using audio description or not.
One last one.
So if you have a program or material that you're presenting, and generally you would be briefed about this in advance, but if even the provider doesn't know about someone you're describing's gender or race, what is the preferred way to go about those descriptions?
I was recently describing something where we just weren't sure, and it was live extemporaneous, and I always default to the most neutral that I can. If I feel like they may have a pronoun, if I feel very strongly that they might have a certain pronoun, I will use it, but more often than not, I will say they. And you, especially if the person has not been named. So I can't just say, this is Marguerite. I would say they have short hair, and then they would constantly be referred to as the short-haired person, or the person with blue eyeshadow, or the person wearing a black shirt, which can get very, very convoluted when you're trying to fit into the pauses. But I will definitely try to do more of a default and pick an item from them visually to describe them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bridget.
Yeah.
I will have you exit the stage, and we will have our last video about virtual event roles and responsibilities. And I will take a moment to intro that. One moment while I navigate to my notes. Okay. Next, we'll learn about virtual event roles and responsibilities. We at ICANN and CCAC have found to be the roles we have found to be most useful in hoping our events run smoothly virtually. And these are the roles that are operating behind the scenes as we speak. To talk us through that is Hillary Pearson, who is a steering committee member and co-chair of CCAC and the senior manager of operations and accessibility services with the Harris Theater. So without further ado, we will let Hillary's video play.
A voiceover. Presentation slides with black text on a white background. Top left corner shows ICANN logo.
Hi there, this is Hillary with the ICANN team, and I'm just going to talk through a little bit about supporting your virtual events and some of the things that we have done with our virtual programming to help support our content. So we're going to focus on 4 different support roles throughout this presentation: the host, the tech support, the chat support, and the Q&A support. So the host or co-host, a lot of this has already kind of been talked through from other presenters with settings and how to make sure that you are set up for success for any of your accessible services. So really, a host is responsible for double checking all those settings that are needed for the event are enabled or disabled, such as recording or captioning or the language interpretation features, making sure that screen sharing permissions are set, whether, the presenters themselves are going to share their screens or whether we're assigning somebody from the support team to do so, making sure anything that's being shared at the top of the program or as the program wraps up is ready to go. Check attendee view settings, which we'll get into in the next slide. So thinking about what do you want your attendees to see when you're broadcasting your webinar. Spotlighting views when needed, hiding non-video participants when needed. Sometimes that's really integral when you're trying to clear up the screen for your attendee view to make sure that they're only seeing who's speaking or, your interpreters or who needs to be on the screen. Ensuring that content is being recorded in the cloud or on a desktop, depending on what the programming is and if you're going to be posting it after. Allowing or disallowing participant controls, such as raising hands or unmuting. Additionally, hosts can also post polls, enable any additional features that are integral to the setting, such as a whiteboard or annotation options. So just making sure that all the pieces of the pie that are needed for the event to run successfully are preset and ready to go through the host controls. screen I'm showing right now is an example of what a host can see when they are setting up the webinar. As the panelists are signing on for a dress rehearsal or before attendees arrive, you can organize some of those settings in advance of getting started with your webinar broadcast. So if you click on the participant window when you're in the webinar setting as the host, you'll see this breakdown of panelists and attendees. And on the bottom right corner, there'll be 3 little dots that you can click for more options. And that's what's on the screen right now is that window that pops up that starts with ask all to unmute when you click on those 3 little dots. And an important setting to note here is that there is an option to set the video layout for attendees prior to starting the event. So you can have your attendees follow the host view mode, follow an active speaker view mode, or follow a gallery view mode. So a reminder for webinar is that you as the host and your back-end panelists are going to be seeing something different than your attendees. So it's important to go through that video layout table to make sure that you are broadcasting what you want for the day. For us, typically it's going to be gallery view because we're showing a speaker, potentially an ASL interpreter, and potentially, you know, this shared screen of a PowerPoint. So allowing the attendees to see all those things is very important. Another support role that we can talk through is tech support. So really this person is sort of your behind the scenes person who's managing any issues that might arise with, you know, viewing the interpreter or having issues with captioning or any other functionality of Zoom. So this person should have a clear presence in the chat, maybe call themselves tech support or, you know, make their presence known. They should be the contact for anyone who might have any issues viewing anything, or if there's an immediate question or needs to troubleshoot. Help with timekeeping is a really good way to use the tech support, maybe posting some cues for the speakers or hosts in the chat about maybe they have 2 minutes left to speak before the next person needs to start. This person should be available to reach out to external stakeholders, i.e. to a service provider contact or other member of the support team to problem solve in real time. And also this person can help lead the conversation to review any tech issues and follow up with appropriate parties or talk through solutions post-event if there's a post-mortem that's needed to correct something for the next time. Chat support, this really is a content-driven support role, and they should be the one responsible for, you know, posting the welcoming message in the chat, you know, thanks for joining us, we'll be starting soon. You know, if there's a countdown to event start time, or explaining who in the room is there for support, such as the tech support person, where to post Q&A. They should be reiterating the spoken instructions for viewing captions, ASL interpretation, or language interpretation features using that chat, you know, as much as possible without being overwhelming. You know, they're also going to be available to provide the general flow of user experience. How is Q&A being run that day? What to use the chat for? Also helpful for the chat support person to be in charge of links that are going to be tied to the program, such as maybe a presenter's website as they're speaking, their social media handles, maybe some resources, survey link, you know, future programming info, things that are really content driven regarding this program. And Q&A support. So this person should be focused really on what's happening with questions that are submitted. So they're really sorting any questions out for things that can be answered immediately by them, things that are going to be answered live during the event, and then things that might be a larger bandwidth question that need to be answered post-event via a follow-up email. You know, this role is really scalable because it depends on really what your format is for the programming. If you're not expecting a lot of Q&A, or if you really haven't set yourself up to, you know, really have time for that, you know, this person could maybe be absorbed into one of the other roles. But if you're really doing a Q&A heavy program, it's great to have somebody monitoring that. And then some additional recommendations that we just have learned along the way as we've all embraced Zoom. Creating a virtual event checklist for pre-event, during the event, and post-event will really help you get started and streamline some of these processes and make sure that you have enough support in the room to help you. Creating shareable documents that the support team can refer to and use during the program. Like, we found it really helpful to have a chat link and a Q&A document that are separate from Zoom that we can organize. We use Google Documents to do that, so it kind of updates in real time. You know, you can really make sure that you can copy paste exactly what you need from helpful chat links, and you can organize any of the Q&A portion of Zoom so that, you know, you can prioritize the questions that really should be answered or who should be answering them. Make sure that you're sharing PowerPoints, you're sharing resources and speaker names with service providers at least 48 hours prior to the event as much as possible. If you can conduct a dress rehearsal or a tech rehearsal, maybe enabling practice sessions through webinar, that's a really great way to catch any of the things that you might not be thinking about during the program and make sure that you aren't kind of stuck during the event trying to problem solve. Make sure your call time for speakers and service providers allow for enough time for you to work through any sort of tech setup needs prior to the start of the broadcast, such as a sound check with all the panelists and service providers and making sure the captioning links are all working. Keep connected outside of the Zoom space for any troubleshooting. I would just encourage your support team to be connected via a text chain or some sort of messaging service so that you can stay in the loop with each other and problem solve in real time as needed. And then always remember that events are scalable. If you have more presenters or elements in your program, try to add more support if you can, or try to figure out ways to be creative, that you're using the right people in the right spaces. Thank you so much. That's all for me.
Hillary, welcome. I'll have you describe yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hillary Pearson. I am a white woman wearing glasses and a pretty large headset. I am wearing a light blue shirt and I'm sitting in front of a burgundy background with some little bird stencils on the wall. And I want to say going last in a program like this is great because I feel like so much of this content has been delved into by my wonderful colleagues. So, and also, we're always learning and growing. So even some of the things in our videos and my video of like, oh, as we did our tech walkthrough and doing a dress rehearsal, we learned new things, and just being able to keep an open mind about that is important.
Yes. Thank you everyone for sticking around this late in the day. And yes, to echo Hillary, as much as we might seem like experts because we're hosting a webinar on this, it's totally based on our experience with trial and error and consulting people with disabilities and consulting service providers. So it's just, we're sharing our knowledge in real time with you, really. I think even though you're going last, Hillary, there are a lot of questions for you. So Andy, I will let you start voicing some of those.
All right. So someone is looking for a list of best practices that they can point to as they're building programs and to also point to with their executives in their company. Is there any list of best practices or things that you could recommend that they look at?
So I think in terms of, if we're going to speak to like board buy-in and thinking of best practices of that, I think one of the things that is important to start reframing the conversation about is that these features aren't just for a specific population. It's really about looking at things in the universal approach. So really trying to have these conversations through the context of this is a feature that all audiences can buy into. I'm thinking about, especially in the virtual world, we've had so many opportunities to think about captioning in a new way and what that means and how much folks really do utilize those features. You know, you're on the train, maybe watching a video, and you have the captions on. You know, you might have somebody who's an English as a second language audience member or performer or panelist. So having all of those features enabled and being able to kind of start, quote unquote, normalizing those processes. I would say for best practices as well as, you know, if you are an individual who is sort of advocating for accessibility features to be included, you know, try to find your allies within your organization, try to find your allies within the community, such as, you know, CCAC or the ICANN team, you know, connecting with folks who have resources or who have probably kind of faced the same barriers that you have. And really best practices of just getting in at the conversation as early as you can. With the production team, with the folks who are really responsible for content, you know, what are the areas that you have some sort of control or inroads in the process of like creating content, and so that it's not something that happens after the fact, and it's baked in. In terms of communicating out what you're doing, I think a lot of our panelists have already kind of talked about, you know, you want to make sure that you are letting your audiences know what you're doing, that you're providing access, you know, whether it's your e-blasts, through your website, your social media posts,
And then also, if you're going to be engaging in a way to communicate that out, of being able to provide a way for patrons and your guests to communicate in to you and have a point person an email, a phone number that they can reach out to, whether it's for in-person or virtual events, to really have that conversation. And one more thing I'll say to like the buy-in thing, that captioning videos really actually optimizes your search engine optimization. So if we were thinking about reaching the most amount of people, and if someone is searching for your event, because Google searches are based in your like keywords and not really an image and the video, they can't read that. The more features you enable and the more like of that word count and those levels of detail with text you have, it optimizes what results when someone is searching. So in terms of like thinking about how you can start having those conversations with folks making those decisions, it is an inroad that can be explored.
So how do you suggest any workarounds with folks who or organizations that can't afford the Zoom subscription, or that perhaps don't have enough staff to have a Q&A person, a chat, a host, a tech support? Any ways that you can think of to work around those things?
I think it kind of depends on your content. I think that's a big part of it. If there's opportunities for you to supply more context prior to an engagement, if you're not in a position to, do a live captioner through Zoom, I believe that the auto captioning is now enabled at every level of Zoom, whether you're paid or not. So in terms of just, there's one level of a barrier removed in terms of the auto captioning is available to any level. Communicating out to your patrons, usually using, eBlast social media, is typically not going to be a heavy lift for beginning to explore accessible services and communicating with your patron base. We don't want to advocate for anyone doing anything on a volunteer basis when it comes to, asking the disability community to tell you what you need to do as an organization. But there are definitely ways that you can kind of reach out to the community, use the CCAC listserv. It's a great tool that connects a lot of accessibility allies across the Chicagoland area to maybe talk through solutions about low-cost options. Trying to think of anything else off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, if we think about, for example, like the context of maybe a live, a performance that you would typically have program notes for in a typical setting, or you would have maybe the text and translation for in a typical setting, how can you incorporate some of those sort of standard programmatic items into a layer of providing access, and not necessarily having to call it an accessible feature, but calling out the things about those things that make it a more universal item.
Yeah, I will add that while I mentioned that CCAC is a nonprofit, we're also volunteer run. So everything that Hillary described as our virtual event roles and everyone who's participating behind the scenes, we're a volunteer organization. So it's not to say that it can't be volunteers doing this, or more staff members that don't necessarily wear that hat in their title, that are just helping you run a virtual event of maybe it's your marketing director, but your marketing director is responding in the chat, all hands on deck. So you don't have to hire these specific roles, I will add.
Yeah, and I will say thanks for the comment from Marcus in the chat of just try to partner with organizations or organizations that might have more opportunities for funding, or figure that might be able to provide you some of these resources, and additional accessibility that they've already built out that you might not even know that you could have access to. So thank you for that, Marcus.
We have about 5 minutes left, so let's do one more and see where we're at with that timing, Andy.
So as you're marketing your event, or you're creating your registration, or letting press know, are there any disability language guides that would be available, or sort of language best practices that you could point to?
Well, I will say, speaking from experience with working with CCAC, we will typically defer to person first language when we are speaking about marketing events. Language is ever changing. and very personal to the person that you're speaking with. So for us, in terms of an exact resource, we do have some resources on the CCAC archive page with just kind of language do's and don'ts or best practices based on that sort of person first language model. And we have a few other archives that you can definitely look at. Oh yeah, Christina just dropped that in the chat, which is our Your Words, Our Image document that you're welcome to pull off and download or go to the website and visit. But we will say, we've had a lot of conversations about language and how identity first language or person first language is really about the person that you're speaking to and having that one-on-one interaction with. But for us, as a standard for outward communication, when you're talking to a large pool of people where you're not really identifying with one individual, we will typically defer to person first language.
Yep. I think we can have one more quick question and then we'll wrap it up. Do you have a quick one, Andy?
Sure. So as you're creating your registration process, do you have any tips on communicating for your webinars or your events, how to communicate that these are accessible?
Yes, I will say for us from point A to point Z of just including that information as part of your registration path, of just spelling it out very clearly that we will have, a real-time captioning available or live captioning with ASL interpretation for the engagement from the get-go in all of our paths of quote unquote purchase or registering for the event. We also do ask within our registration forms for CCAC and ICANN is if there's anything additional or there's any accessible features that you would want to take part of in this program that might not already be included. So really, and then with that, having someone who's kind of monitoring that chain of communication and an option for someone to call as well. So really establishing for your organization who is the keeper of that information, whether it's through your box office staff or whether it's through another individual with your team, of just establishing that connection of who can be that person who's monitoring that and having that follow-up conversation and figuring out what is the best tool for this person to access what you're presenting.
Yeah, we do that at Chicago Humanities Festival too, where accessible services are requested in the purchase pathway. So when you're buying a ticket, there's a pre-selected menu of items that you can request, like closed captions, ASL, audio description, and we train our box office staff to ask over the phone at the end of every transaction, like, do you require an accessible accommodation? And of course, you need to make sure you have timelines and a person to oversee that, but we found it to be very, very successful.
Yeah, and I would say just to really quickly, like, it's that process in itself. It's including it with every opportunity for purchase is what's going to allow for folks to start identifying that they need a service, like in the moment, and not as something that's seen as an add-on or only for a specific population. The more we can kind of put that into our normal, like our standard customer service language, the easier it is for people to realize that they might need to look into something.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Hillary. I'll have you turn your video off and we will conclude here. Thank you so much to our panelists and our service providers for this wonderful webinar today. I just wanted to remind you that we have recorded this and we will be sharing our videos after the fact, so you'll be able to view them on your own time. They will be captioned and audio described. And also there is a survey that is being circulated in the chat, so we'd love for you to give feedback on how we did today and things you'd like to learn in the future. I'll also mention that there were so many questions and so many follow-up questions that I'm sure that I've documented everything and my colleagues have documented everything as well. So if there are any burning questions, we will share them with our panel. And when we share these materials after the fact, we'll include some of those answers to questions that might not have been answered. And also, don't forget to stay in touch with us on our ICANN page at chicagoculturalaccess.org. And if this event was helpful to you, help us keep it going by visiting chicagoculturalaccess.org/donate. Thank you so much, and see you next time, everyone.
White text on a black background. Accessibility in virtual events, a technical step-by-step. Presented by Illinois Cultural Accessibility Network. For workshop resources and more information, visit chicagoculturalaccess.org. Presenting speakers. Moderator Brittany Pyle, ICANN. Risa Jazz Rifkin, CCAC and Director of Civic Engagement at Disability Lead. Eddie Medrano, Assistant Director of Production at Chicago Humanities Festival. Bridget Melton, Audio Describer. Hillary Pearson, CCAC and Senior Manager of Operations and Accessibility Services at Harris Theater for Music and Dance. Workshop Accessibility. Real-time captioning and ASL interpretation provided by Alternative Communication Services. Video editing, captioning, and audio description by BridgetMelton.com.